and welcome to In the Kitchen with Mary Mac. Today we're going to make lasagna. I know we've been promising this forever, so we finally decided to do a lasagna episode. So we're going to give away Aunt Rachel's sort of recipe for lasagna. We're sort of going to give away Aunt Rachel's recipe. She doesn't listen to podcasts, so hopefully my life is safe. So I'll probably tell her at a later date, hey, guess what I did? I gave everyone your recipe for lasagna, the whole wide world. Theoretically, if the whole wide world listened to my podcast, they would have it. But there's a funny story happened. I follow a page called Growing Up Italian, and I believe on Facebook, and they had a funny little interaction between a mother or a girl and her grandmother. This girl asked her grandmother for her recipe for lasagna, and her grandmother says, I just used the one on the box. And she goes, what do you mean you just used the one on the box? And she goes, everybody uses the one on the box. And I thought, I never thought about that. So I was planning on making lasagna, and I bought a box of my favorite brand of lasagna noodles, which is Barilla, and it is a noodle that is made in Italy. So I bought my favorite box of lasagna noodles and looked on the back, and sure enough, that darn recipe is pretty close to my Aunt Rachel's. So I'm kind of thinking maybe that's what it is. Everybody got theirs off the box. There's a bit of a variation, which we'll go over the way I make my lasagna. I really wanted to do this since we had just made the ricotta cheese. So here's something you can use. And we just did the sauce, making your own red sauce. So now what you have to do is make your ricotta cheese and make your pot of red sauce. Now we can make the lasagna. Okay? You're going to need a 9x13 lasagna pan. Now, a 9x13 lasagna pan is a little bit deeper than a regular 9x13 cake pan. Okay?
Is it like a casserole dish?
It's very similar to a casserole dish. It's usually 9x13 by about 2.5 to 3 inches deep. But anything that's close to that. A lot of people like the foil pans that if you see them at the grocery store, it says that they're for lasagna. You have to remember you have to remember always that sauce will interact with aluminum. So I'm not a big fan of doing dishes that have tomato sauce in them in lasagna pans. So you'd be better off to just get yourself I like using glass when I'm doing lasagna. So you're better off to get yourself a nice 9x13 deeper casserole type baking dish, not a cake pan, but a little bit deeper, because what happens is your lasagna will creep right up over the edge. But that's not a terrible thing. You can just still eat it, So here's what you need to make a batch of your own delicious lasagna. You will need a box of lasagna noodles. You will need some olive oil. You'll need about 1.5 to 2 pounds of ricotta cheese that you made yourself, or dry ricotta cheese that you bought at the grocery store. Remember, you have to use dry ricotta cheese because I'm saying that you do. It's my rule. Now, dry ricotta is better. It's just better. So if you get a loaf of ricotta, make sure it's about, a pound is not quite enough. I prefer 2 pounds of ricotta. Okay, so 2 pounds is perfect. 1.5 pounds is okay. If you make your own ricotta and you use a whole gallon of milk to do it, you will have enough ricotta cheese to make a recipe of lasagna. So remember that if you want to make your own ricotta, use a gallon of whole milk in the recipe, and then you'll have enough. You should have plenty of cheese. You'll need 2 quarts of tomato sauce, spaghetti sauce. You can either use the homemade recipe that I gave you in my previous podcast, or you can buy 2 quart jars of, I like a traditional sauce that doesn't have a bunch of, you don't want the big chunks of vegetable in it, you know what I mean? So you might want to get like a regular traditional meatless sauce. I don't put meat in my lasagna. I don't like meat in lasagna. It is not needed in lasagna, and I think I just don't like it. You can put it in if you want it, but this is the recipe that I'm giving you, doggone it, and I'm not putting any meat in there. I'll throw the meat in at the end to tell you if you want to add meat to it, but you don't need it. So you'll also need 1 cup of shredded provolone cheese, and then you're going to need a 1/2 cup of grated Romano cheese, okay? Not that other cheese that I don't like, but Romano cheese. Parmesan has no place in this. No place. Okay. Salt and pepper to taste. Also, garlic and basil for your seasonings. Okay, so you're going to need salt, pepper, granulated garlic, and dried basil leaves. Okay, now you're going to cook your lasagna noodles according to your package directions. And lasagna noodles, you have to pay attention to them if you've never cooked them before. You can also use a product that Barilla makes, which is a lasagna noodle that does not require baking to make lasagna with. They work very well. I have used them, but you absolutely cannot shortcut your sauce when you use those noodles because they absorb a lot of moisture during the baking process. Okay? Oh, I forgot you need an egg too. Forgot the egg, sorry. Okay. So you're going to cook your lasagna noodles according to the package directions. Keep an eye on them. Make sure to keep them moving in the water. When you drain them, drizzle them with a little bit of olive oil and kind of lightly move them around with a spoon so they don't break. But the olive oil helps them to not stick together while they're in your strainer. So that's a good tip. With your cheeses, you're going to get a big bowl. You're going to put your ricotta in there and break it all up with your fingers, okay? And it'll break up into little bits, little bitsy pizzas. Now you're going to add your shredded provolone cheese, your 1 cup of shredded provolone cheese or more, however you want to do that. You can always add a little more. Then you're going to put in your 1/2 cup of grated Romano cheese, okay? You're going to sprinkle salt and pepper. I would say about a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 1/4 teaspoon of pepper. You're going to put a teaspoon of dried basil leaves in, and you're going to put about a 1/2 teaspoon of granulated garlic in. Mix that around with your hands. Now you're going to crack an egg into it and mix that egg all around through that cheese, okay? Now you have a lovely yellow, lumpy, gooey mass of cheese in a bowl. Here's how we assemble the lasagna. You're going to take your 9x13 dish and you're going to put sauce in the bottom of the 9x13 dish. I don't grease typically my baking dish when I make lasagna. I don't know. I just don't do that. You can if you want to, if you're worried about cleanup or whatever. You can grease your dish or spray it with cooking spray, but you don't have to. So put some sauce in the bottle. I like to use a soup ladle. It's about a 3/4 cup measure, a soup ladle. So scoop up a ladle of sauce and put it in the bottom, spread it around. Put lasagna on the bottom to cover it, and it's usually about 5 pieces of the lasagna noodles, and you can put, sometimes like the 9x13 pan, you want to put 4 side by side and 1 long ways at the end. It doesn't matter. You're going to be eating it. Believe me, it'll be beautiful. You're going to take your cheese mixture. We're going to need enough for 2 to 3 layers of your cheese mixture. So if you can kind of divide that up in your mind, sprinkle 1/3 of your cheese mixture from your bowl onto the lasagna noodles, and then drizzle sauce on top of that, and then put your next layer of lasagna noodles on, top with the next 1/3 of cheese, drizzle sauce on top of it, put your next lasagna noodles on, then do your top layer of cheese, your last bit of cheese, and put your last layer of lasagna noodles on. If your cheese doesn't work out to have quite enough, like if you don't think it's enough, just do 2 layers, because that's happened to me before. It just wasn't quite enough. Sometimes I had too much and my layers were ridiculous, so, but
I have a question about
Yes.
the sauce. When you say drizzle the sauce on, how well should it be covered?
well, you
for
want to
each
use
layer?
if you do like I said, if you put the ladle, if you use the ladle, it's probably going to be like 2 ladles full, 1.5 ladles full. So it's going to be like 3/4 of a cup and a little bit more, maybe to pour over the top of it, and then put the noodles on. So you got your bottom layer that's like a cup of sauce or so, and then your next and your next and your next. When you get to the top layer, put your lasagna noodles on, and you want to really cover that sauce. You don't want to have any dry noodles on the top of your lasagna, okay? So You may have a little bit of sauce left over. I usually don't, because as I'm doing this, sometimes you use more, less, whatever. You don't want to run out of sauce, okay? So it's better to have a little bit extra left over. But when you put that top layer on, you're going to put all the remaining sauce on it. You can put some shredded provolone cheese on top or a sprinkle of your grated Romano cheese, whichever you prefer, and then you're ready to bake it. So now that you have it ready, you want to put a loose tent of foil over the top. You don't want your foil to stick onto your cheese and sauce. So kind of cover that with foil. Hopefully your pan will not be like clear up to the top, but cover that with foil and put it in the oven for 25 minutes at 375 degrees, okay? After 25 minutes, you want to take that foil off and let it cook for 5 or 10 more minutes just to get the cheese a little bit browned up. And then you're going to take it out of the oven and let it rest for about 15 minutes before you serve it so it can kind of get nice and formed together. And then you will enjoy the best lasagna you've ever had because you made it yourself with all the things that you made yourself. And it will be delicious. It will be absolutely delicious. If you have sauce left over, what we like to do at our house is we put sauce into like a cream pitcher and have it at the table on the side to put a little more sauce on if you desire, but you probably won't need it. This makes a nice big container of lasagna, and that you will be able to take it to work for 4 or 5 days. Okay, now if you want to have meat in your sauce for your lasagna, if you like meat in it, you can either brown a pound of Italian sausage or a pound of hamburger, brown it up and break it up into small pieces, and then add that into your sauce. And you can put that in as you do your layers. So your sauce would just then have meat in it. But like I said, I don't like to put meat in it. I just like it regular like it is. And that's how my Aunt Rachel made it, with no meat in it, just the cheese and the sauce. And it was good enough for us. So we liked it. And I'm sure you will too. Here's the special tip from Aunt Rachel. Don't use that kind of cheese the Americans use. Use the kind of cheese the Italians use. What Aunt Rachel means there is, don't use the kind of ricotta cheese that comes in a plastic container with a lid on it in the dairy section. That is sort of like cottage cheese. It's very wet ricotta. It's ricotta that they didn't drain it for whatever reason. So you want to use the dry loaf ricotta cheese that's usually found in your cheese section of your better grocery stores, particularly Italian ones, okay? But you're making your own. You're making your own ricotta cheese. You don't even have to worry about it. Your ricotta cheese will be dry because you're going to make Mary Mac's ricotta cheese, right? Right? Okay.
All right, well, be sure to check us out online on Facebook and Instagram at Mary Mac Bakehouse, on Twitter at Mary Mac Podcast, and on our website, marymacpodcast.com.
Thanks a lot for listening if you did, and if you didn't, too bad for you.